Hey guys, it's Alex. I'm here with edition 4 of our binge read contemporary young adult novels. I've got another 3 for you today. The first book I read was Your Welcome Universe by Whitney Gardner. I read this on a recommendation from Michael S. Deutsch. This book is about a girl who gets expelled from her school because someone writes a slur about her best friend on the wall and she covers it with graffiti. And her best friend turns her in, and she gets expelled and has to go to a normal public school. And she's deaf, so this presents certain difficulties. And it's basically about that and her still continuing on with her graffiti and making new friends and dealing with hearing kids. This was a really good book. I'm so glad I read it. I don't know what I was expecting going in, but this was pretty much the best case scenario for this book. Like, I didn't think it was going to be an amazing, life-changing book, and it wasn't, but it was really good. I loved the way art had its place in the plot and the way it was written about and talked about. Like, clearly Whitney Gardner did a lot of research on graffiti and art in general to write this. If you don't want to read a book where art is the main plot, this might not be for you. But if you enjoy books that center around art, this was really good. And I thought it was really interesting to read about because I'm not an artist at all. I have zero artistic ability. But I do enjoy reading and learning about art and people who do have artistic ability. My major complaint in this book was that it was really fast-paced. Like, I had trouble keeping up sometimes, and there were a lot of things going on, and several different plot lines that all got wrapped up, but there was just a whole lot going on, and a whole lot of characters, and things that didn't really matter to the central story, but still got a lot of plot time. Like, her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend. I didn't really see their need to be in the story as much as they were. Even with that, I thought it was still pretty good. I would have liked for her to slow down a little bit so I didn't feel as rushed when I was reading this. And I feel like I missed things because I didn't want to slow down and read this book really slowly and reread passages to catch everything that was mentioned. It's not the kind of book I wanted to do that for. I just wanted to read it straight through, and it made it hard to do that because there was so much going on. The illustrations in this book were nice, but I didn't really see that they were necessary or that they really added much to the story itself. Because the artwork was described, and it was described well enough that I didn't need to look at the actual art to know what she was talking about, and it just seemed sort of extraneous. My absolute favorite thing was the way the dialogue was written. Whenever Julia was talking with people in sign language, the dialogue was written normally, and it flowed really well, and it was easy to read. But then when she was talking to hearing people and they were speaking out loud, or like there was miming going on to communicate with them, the dialogue was choppy and like difficult to read and you missed things. And that was really well done just because like it added to the experience of her being a deaf protagonist. And it felt really realistic because that's how she would experience the world. Like, the sign language is normal, the speaking out loud is the difficult part, and I really, really enjoyed that. The characterization was also done really well. I loved the characters in this, and I loved that they didn't all have real names, because Julia would just nickname them whatever she felt like, just because she didn't catch their names easily, so she would just refer to them and then call it, oh, that's their name sign, to get away with it. Like, her friend that she meets at the hearing school, her name was Yoga Pants, and she called her YP for Yoga Pants the entire book, and you never learn her real name. And it was just funny, and it didn't detract from the characterization at all. It's just, you got used to her being YP, you got used to not knowing her name or anyone's name, and I really loved the characters. I really loved following them. YP especially was probably my favorite, and I thought her subplot was done really well with her boyfriend, or her ex-boyfriend, and their relationship and the way it wasn't always as cut and dry as Julia immediately assumed. I gave this book 4 stars, and I would highly recommend it as a nice contemporary YA read. The second book I read was The Last Time We Say Goodbye by Cynthia Hand. This book is about a teenage girl named Lex, whose brother has recently committed suicide. And basically, it centers around he sent her a text the night he died. And she goes through her grieving process with her therapist and her friends, and realizing that her life isn't the same as it was before, and it will never be the same. And it's just a general book about grief. I thought this was wonderful. The grief and the emotion in this book felt so real, and it was so visceral that at times reading this made my chest physically hurt. I didn't cry outright, but I did get teary-eyed at more than a couple of bits, and it was just, it hit me really hard, and the emotion was so well done, and it was so well written, and I enjoyed this so much. There was a little bit about refusal of medication, like medication was something that was bad or shouldn't be taken or something at the beginning that made me a little bit uncomfortable, just because in these kinds of situations, medication as like a negative or painted in a negative light always makes me uncomfortable because it can really help. And she just had this very strong, medication is bad, I don't want to take it, throughout the vast majority of this book. Which there wasn't a lot of it there was just enough that it was something I noticed and something that really stuck out to me. And there were times that this book got a little bit preachy. Just, the author, Cynthia Hand, listed statistics that I'm pretty sure we've all seen from like high school health classes or our own research, or that are just out there because they're really obvious statistics, and she would like go through and list them and then talk about them, and it got a little bit preachy, and I felt like I was being talked down to at a couple of points, which I wasn't really a fan of. Like, I knew all the statistics, like maybe not, that I could quote them, but they were all things we heard before about, risk factors and who's more likely to do it and how you succeed, and I don't know, I wasn't a fan of that. And it did get a little bit generic, just because I felt like I'd read this book before. It follows that same blueprint that every book about suicide or teenagers grieving does. And there wasn't anything really new or different about it, but the emotion in it was so well done that I would really recommend this anyway if you do want a sad book about a girl grieving her brother's death. I loved the family dynamic. I loved her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. I loved the way she treated people differently, even people she didn't know so much. And I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars, and I would highly recommend. The final book I read was Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. This book is about a girl whose best friend disappears one summer, and she doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know where her friend went. And then a week later, she gets a letter in the mail that's a list of things for her to do over the summer. And she starts doing the list as a way that, like, it's a scavenger hunt kind of, and at the end she'll find her friend. Because this was something they'd done before with, like, dares and, like, her receiving lists from her friend. And she starts going through the list, and she meets this boy, and does lots of new exciting things. And, yeah, general plot happens. It was cute, but I couldn't really get into it. I felt like I had read this book 100 times before in every other contemporary young adult novel that I'd ever read. Like, halfway through, I felt like I could tell you exactly how it ended and not be wrong about anything. Like, there was one point where I think I was like 100 pages from the end, and the characters did something, and I was texting my friend, and I basically told him exactly what was going to happen in the rest of the book. And I read the rest of the book, and that's exactly what happened. Like, plot point for point. I was not wrong about anything, and that's basically what kind of book this was. It was really, really generic. And it wasn't that bad. Like, it wasn't bad generic, like, it was a painful read. It was fine. Like, this is the kind of read, like, I kind of enjoyed the experience of reading it. Like, it wasn't terrible in any aspect. It was just super generic. And for a 450-page young adult contemporary, I kind of expect it to do something new. And this book didn't do anything new. It could have been 300 pages without losing anything, and I probably would have enjoyed it more. I know everyone loves the playlists in this book, and in all Morgan Matson books, maybe. I don't know, I haven't read them, this is my first one. But I didn't really see the point of them. Like, she jokes about music with the boy some, and it's like a thing, but it's not important enough that I really felt the need to include these playlists that were sort of extraneous and not really super important to the story. Like, I could have been just fine without them. Because I started to listen to them all, and then I sort of realized that it didn't matter. Like, if this book was about music, I would understand that. But it wasn't about music, and the playlists weren't really important other than they kind of joke about country music and his indie rock or whatever he was listening to. I also didn't like Sloane. Like, I feel like at points you weren't really supposed to like her that much, and then you kind of were, and then you weren't, and I didn't like her. That's annoying. Like, she just randomly disappeared, and she seemed like she wasn't that great of a friend to begin with, and I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, and I don't know. It was fine, but for 450 pages, I kind of expect better than fine. It just seemed like a waste of time in a book that could have been under 300 and still had the same plot and story and character development. It didn't do anything new. It was just a generic 3-star young adult contemporary read. I can definitely see myself reading more Morgan Matson books in the future, but this book didn't really drive me to want to read them anymore. Let me know down below in the comments if y'all have read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd really like to hear your thoughts. And if you disagree with me, because I know a lot of people love Since You've Been Gone, and I was a meh on it. So feel free to disagree. I love talking about books in the comment section, especially if we have differing opinions. Bye guys!